Battle of Bull Run is going to center totally around this elevated position known as Henry Hill. Okay, and that's where we're at. Now, besides having the high ground on Henry Hill, what else do you think the Confederates have on the top of that hill that's really going to benefit them in this battle? Two cannons. Very good. There were two cannons, Confederate cannons, stationed on top of Henry Hill that they would be firing upon the Union forces down on the battlefield. Well, if you're the Union, your thought process has to be what? We better get up there and try to capture those Confederate cannons. And that's exactly what happens. The 2nd Wisconsin Infantry, fighting for the North from Wisconsin, including a young man by the name of William Collins, attacks and they secure those two cannons back for the Union. So the Confederates have control of these two Confederate cannons on top of Henry Hill. They are occupying the high ground, and because the Union knows that's not going to work very well for them, if they're going to win this battle, the 2nd Wisconsin Infantry charges Henry Hill and captures those two Confederate cannons, and one of the men included in that capture was a young man by the name of William Collins. Well, once the Wisconsin Infantry secured those cannons, what did they do with them? Began to fire them at Confederate forces. Okay? Well, the Confederate leaders and forces realized, boy, if we don't retake those cannons on top of Henry Hill, we're going to lose the battle for sure. So what happens? Confederate forces, the 5th Virginia Infantry, including a young man by the name of John Opie, recapture those Confederate cannons. So Henry's Hill changes ownership, so to speak, several times during this battle. First the Confederates have it, then the 2nd Wisconsin Infantry take it over, and now the 5th Virginia Infantry is going to recapture, including a young man by the name of John Opie. Well, after this, the Confederates hold the high ground again. And they continue to hold the high ground, and by 3 o'clock that afternoon, on July 21st, 1861, the tide started to turn against the Union. So after their final recapture of the cannons on Henry Hill and the great progress the Confederate forces are making against Union forces, by 3 o'clock that afternoon of July 21st, 1861, the tide's turning against the Union. And they begin to take heavy casualties, that being the Union. Well, what happens in most instances, Joe, if you're fighting a battle and you start taking heavy casualties? You retreat, and that's what they did, and they retreated across a bridge that was going across Bull Run Creek called Stone Bridge. So all of a sudden now, because they're taking heavy casualties, it becomes a Confederate rout, and the Union soldiers begin to retreat in heavy numbers across Bull Run Creek over Stone Bridge. So the first Battle of Bull Run is going to end in a rout for the Confederates. Not exactly what the Union was planning for. And I'll show you examples of this later, but you'd be amazed what these sightseers were doing. They were skedaddling like crazy, trying not to get caught up and killed in this thing either. They found out that their side wasn't doing too good in this little sporting event. So the first Battle of Bull Run ends in a rout for the Confederates. Union forces scramble in a hasty retreat. And where are they retreating back to? Where'd they come from? Washington, D.C. Now, we're going to talk about several of these. But at this point, as Union forces are skedaddling back in retreat to Washington, D.C., the South makes the first tactical or strategical error in the Civil War. So as the Northern soldiers, the Union soldiers, are skedaddling in retreat back to D.C., it will be the South, or the Confederacy, that makes the first tactical or strategic error of the Civil War. Anybody want to guess what strategic error they made?
They didn't pursue.
Absolutely. Very good, Gabe. General Thomas Stonewall Jackson tried hard to convince Beauregard pursue the Union forces all the way back to D.C. But Beauregard refused because he chose instead to care for his wounded that were wounded in the battle. So Thomas Stonewall Jackson urged General P.G.T. Beauregard to pursue the Union all the way back to Washington. And instead of listening to Stonewall Jackson's advice, he stayed put in Virginia to care for his own wounded men. Admirable, but not real bright. Historians will tell you that if Beauregard would have followed Stonewall Jackson's advice and pursued the Union forces all the way back to D.C., the Civil War certainly would have ended, but in favor of who? The South. Okay, think about that. Wouldn't that have been interesting, right? Wouldn't that have been interesting? So, we talk about casualties in the First Battle of Bull Run. Pretty heavy, really, when you think about it. The Confederates lost approximately 1,750 soldiers in the First Battle of Bull Run. 1,750 in the First Battle of Bull Run on the Confederate side. 1,750 soldiers. The Union lost nearly 3,000. 2,950 is what was estimated. 2,950. So not quite twice as many, but quite a few more. Now, why was that maybe not such a big deal casualty-wise for the North? Population again. They had so many more people. And it won't make a difference right now, but the 2,950 casualties on the part of the Union compared to the 1,750 on the part of the Confederacy won't matter so much now, but in the latter stages of the war, when we've had many, many, many casualties, the South is eventually going to do what? Run out of soldiers. Okay? That's the population thing. Now, this was this disastrous defeat for the Union and President Lincoln. They couldn't believe it. They knew for what? What was going to happen here? The South were not going to be the patsy or the pansy or whatever you want to call it. They thought they were going to be. They were going to fight. And so they have to change their strategy, and they're going to move from capturing Richmond as their goal to capturing control of the Mississippi River. The Union strategy will change to try to gain control of the Mississippi River. If the Union gains control of the Mississippi River, what do they do to the Confederacy? Split it in half. That's going to be their goal, to split the Confederacy in half. Okay, we are going to watch a video. This video does not have everything I told you. It's got extra things, and I want you to pay attention and make a few notes to yourself. And there's two people in particular that I didn't mention that I want you to key in on. Okay? Daniel McCook, M-C-C-O-O-K, Daniel McCook, and his son, Charlie McCook. Daniel McCook and Charlie McCook. There's going to be a story behind these two guys that I want you to know without me kind of spoon-feeding them to you. Okay? Daniel McCook, M-C-C-O-O-K. McCook, like M small c, capital C-O-O-K. And Charlie, Daniel and Charlie.